Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Eugene Chan. Our guest tonight is the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Raymond Siu, who was newly appointed just over a month ago. He has been with the police force for the last 33 years. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you, Eugene.
The Hong Kong police force was once known as Asia's finest, and your team has recently been hailed as the heroes of Hong Kong by Mr. Xia Baolong, the director of the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. And in your website, your stated vision is to maintain Hong Kong as one of the safest and most stable societies in the world. We are in unprecedented times with challenges of COVID as well as the social unrest over the last 2 years. Our question for you tonight is, how will the police force continue to safeguard Hong Kong's stability and prosperity? The national security legislation has been enforced for over a year now, and I think many in our city will say that they feel much safer now than compared to 2019. But as you have said in the South China Morning Post, there have been 18 cases related to explosives and firearms over the past year, with 76 arrested and at least 7 radical groups associated with explosives and firearms. And actually, when you look at the cases, it's quite alarming. There were some in February that they want to plan a Lunar New Year bomb attack. Recently in July, on the 5th, 2 people were alleged to have been connected to a suspected firebomb attack at a CE residence. Not to mention another 9 persons be planning a series of attacks to bomb our courts, our tunnels and streets, and even they make into a flat into an explosive factory. And of course, the widely known cases on the 1st of July, where there is a kind of a lone wolf attack to one of our police officers, basically an attempted murder and subsequent suicide of the suspect. So, should we be worried, Commissioner?
Thank you, Eugene. First of all, I mean, since the enactment of the national security law, in fact, if you talk about the overall crime situation in Hong Kong, for the first 6 months of this year, you can see a drop of 4.6% when compared with the same period last year. Okay. So apart from that, basically, when you talk about some major crimes like robberies and burglaries, we also see a big drop in both of these crimes. In fact, the detection rate for the robberies and also the burglaries hit a record high over a decade. Apart from that, when you talk about the crimes relating to the black turmoil over the past 2 years, it has also dropped from 10% to 40%. So the situation, the overall crime situation is very good. But however, as you said, the threat of domestic terrorism is, we can see such a threat. And also, as you have also said, over the past 2 years, in fact, there were over 20 cases involving genuine firearms and also explosives. And we had repeatedly alert our officers as well as the members of public that we need to stay alert. There could be terrorist attack sometime. So in fact, it has actually happened. First of all, on the 1st of July, there was this lone wolf terrorist attack, followed by a neutralization of one of the terrorist syndicates a few days after. This syndicate, they were intending to set bombs at places like MTR, Court, and also as well as the Cross Harbour Tunnel. So these are something that we need to show concern. So if you ask me, how are we going to deal with this situation? In fact, there are quite a few approaches, including enhancing intelligence gathering, enforcement, and also education and publicity. And first of all, if you talk about enhancing intelligence gathering, this is not just the job of the Hong Kong police. In fact, we are urging the members of the public to help us. You have heard about the National Security Hotline. Yes. In fact, over the past, since the setup of this National Security Hotline, we have already received over 120,000 of different intelligence, different reports from it. And also, apart from that, of course, on the enforcement side, we will continue our high-profile patrol. Apart from deploying some uniformed officers, what is another thing that we would do is to deploy some plainclothes officers as well.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner, I was going to ask you because, I mean, I mentioned a series of incidents and you have acknowledged there are such incidents. And I'm sure a lot of Hong Kong viewers, they never expect Hong Kong to be kind of under the terrorist attack. But let's look at the Hong Kong legislation in Chapter 575. Terrorism is defined as where the use or threat is intended to compel the government and made for purpose of advancing a political, religious or ideological cause. So I can understand why our Chief Secretary, Mr. John Lee, says that Hong Kong is showing signs of breeding terrorist activities. And our Secretary of Security, Chris Tang, has assessed the current level of terrorism threat to Hong Kong to be moderate. So as the Commissioner, you are the one who is leading us to work against that threat. What is your take on that?
Well, as I said, of course, we will continue our resolute action. Earlier I mentioned the intelligence gathering is very important, and we need the support from the members of public. Members of public, they are the best ears and eyes for us.
Okay.
This is very important. And in fact, as I said, the National Security Hotline, there are many, many useful news which actually help us, resulting in a lot of very good arrests of those endangering the national security. And also, apart from that, we also need to work on publicity and education. On the education side, we continue to conduct the counterterrorism exercises. And when I talk about the CT exercises, I'm not just talking about the exercises conducted by the police or by the law enforcement agents ourselves, but it also, very important, we need the participation of members of public as well. And say, for example, we do exercise at the hotels or even shopping arcade. There is security guard inside the hotels or shopping arcades. They need to know, they need to raise their alertness as well. But on the education side, this is something also very important, because, you know, over the past 2 years, a lot of kids, a lot of young people, they are being polluted, their minds are being polluted, poisoned by some people behind, some puppets of the foreign elements. They are they're putting these young people as the sacrificial pawns. So what the parents and the teachers, everybody needs to do something, you know, to instill the positive values and also the law-abiding awareness to the young people. This is something very important.
I want to ask you, this week we had the first person being convicted of terrorism and secession under our national security legislation. Do you think this would deter further cases, or are you worried that more copycat attacks is going to happen?
Well, this case, of course, it would be it poses a very effective deterrent effect to others who intend to do something to endanger the national security law. I want to emphasize, who doesn't want to live in a stable and safe society and world? You know, I mean, only those people, only those puppets of the foreign elements, you know, they have the capability to flee the city into for exile. You know, these are the people who really who show no care to Hong Kong people. I mean, are they doing something for the good of Hong Kong people? Of course not.
Definitely
These are
not.
the lies of the century.
Raymond, I want to ask you, you mentioned about the word intelligence. Without intelligence, you won't be able to get those people. Do we have the capability of, the Hong Kong police force, or do we need extra help to make sure our surveillance system will be able to detect all those major plots against Hong Kong?
Yeah, of course. I mean, surely we have such capability. I mean, the recent neutralization of that syndicate, the terrorist syndicate, the returning valiant, this is something that we do based on an intelligence-led operation. Okay. But of course, as I said earlier, the support from the members of the public is very, very important because they can be our best eyes and ears. Whenever they see anything suspicious, be it a person, an object, or an incident, they need to make report to us as soon as possible.
Right, so before we go to the break, I'm going to ask you after the break that a lot of people, especially the Western media, has termed Hong Kong as become a police state because our Chief Secretary and our Security for Secretary is Chris Tang is one of your police officers before. People saying it's police state. So I'm going to ask you afterwards, are you concerned that Hong Kong is being labeled a police state because of what the Western media are saying? But before you answer me, I want to look at Wikipedia. It describes what is police state. It's a state where the government institutions exercise an extreme level of control over civil society and liberties. And one of our legislator, Ms. Alice Mack, when she was asked about this, she replied, why not? She didn't see that being a police state was a problem, but merely an emphasis on security. What is your view on that?
Well, you have mentioned about the definition of police state. Right. Do you think that's the case? I don't think so. Because I think in Hong Kong, I mean, in the SAR government, there are many key government officials. They have different field of knowledge, expertise, talents, and surely they can govern this government effectively. Those people who actually mention this, I think they are just trying to smear the governance of the SAR government as well as the police force. If you talk about the police force, we act in accordance with the law, okay? And if you talk, we do respect freedom of expression, freedom of speech, etc. But one thing that we need to bear in mind is that freedom is not absolute. Okay, this is very important, and we just act in accordance with the law. And as police officers, we are law enforcement officers, but the DOJ, the Department of Justice, they are responsible for prosecution. And regarding the trial, that's the court's responsibility. This situation is well, same here, today, and tomorrow as well.
Right, Commissioner, I'm going to ask on behalf of some of the viewers. They were saying that for those people who pay tribute, say for that July 1st attack, then they could have breached the national security. Look at the recent Olympia medal presentation ceremony for Zhang Galong, where there are people booing against the national anthem. I mean, those matters were treated quite lightly before, but now I'm sure the police is going to look at with investigations. Doesn't that give more ground for people to say, this is obviously a police state?
Eugene, as I said, we act in accordance with the law. Okay, whether they have committed the crimes, that's something that the court will look into. But when you earlier talk about glorifying those people paying tributes to the terrorists, in particular those bringing their kids to pay tributes to the terrorists, this is something that we need to condemn. Obviously, you know about the national security law, Article 27, glorifying, advocating terrorism or inciting others to commit terrorist attack. You know, this is against the law. And this law, okay, is not just limited to Hong Kong. You can see similar legislation all around the world in some countries like the US, UK, etc. So this is not limited to Hong Kong.
Commissioner, maybe we'll move to an area that you have, personally you have a lot of interest on, is how do we restore the relationship with our younger generation? You know, the protests in 2019 and 20 have been very divisive and polarizing. And many of these taking part are younger generation who seem to be getting more radical, and some of them believe peaceful movement are no longer useful. And I read in an interview in April that you spent hours talking to some of the arrested teens to try to understand their perspective. Can you tell the viewers a bit more what is your discovery and what is your perspective onto our younger generation?
Yeah, over the past 2 years, in fact, I had a lot of opportunities to speak to a lot of young people. That includes university students, secondary students, and also young people arrested by us, and also detainees now in the correctional service department's institutions. And I could see that from the young people, they told me that, well, they spent at least 4 to 5 hours every day to look at the social media.
Right.
And I've said it before, there were so many fake news and fake reports on the social media, and they were just polluted and poisoned by these fake news and fake reports. And also, earlier I mentioned that even some people with legal background, some ex-LegCo members, as well as some law professors, they were saying a lot of things, to try to beautify the illegal acts that some people have committed, as well as, like the ex-LegCo members, they even said, having a criminal record will brighten your life, as well as another one, he said, well, sometimes using violence can resolve problems. This is ridiculous. Okay, this is something really despicable. If they still have a tiny bit of conscience, okay, they better stop it.
Yeah, right. Commissioner, I mean, since you've been there, you have a first-hand experience. Have you thought of any other ways that the whole police force will be able to look at to help to restore the relationship to what we so-called the lost generation? I mean, people often talk about the lost generations, like giving up, but I'm sure we're not giving up, are we? So, any suggestions?
Oh, sure. I said in other media interviews, I recently, in fact, just a few days ago, I met young people, young person who was just discharged from the CSD, the Correctional Service Department,
right.
The one of the detention centers. He showed remorse. He told me that, over the past 2 years, he was very much affected by the fake news and fake reports in the social media. But when he was in the detention center, he was not affected by all these fake news, fake reports, because he got no access to the mobile phone. Right. Okay. And so he actually showed remorse, and he also mentioned that he was being exploited by others. Okay. Previously people said the brotherhood or something like that. But when he was in the detention center, who cared him the most? That's the parents. That's his parents. Okay. And I'm very pleased actually that once he was discharged from the institution, the detention center, but after the summer holiday, I learned that the school heads, he is willing to accept him to go back to the school. This is something that the whole society needs to do. Give them some way out. Okay. If they want to find a job, get them a job. And if they want to pursue their study, find a school for them. Right. This is something that we can, gain back their confidence and on the government and also the society as a whole.
Remember, I'm going to ask you a very direct question that wasn't planned. In the last few years, Hong Kong has gone through basically hell in many ways, and the police force especially been through a lot of pressure, not only on yourself, your colleagues, and the families. However, the public is still. I mean, a part of the public is still having a very negative view of the police. How will you, in very simple words, how are you going to restore the confidence into our police force, because we are once Asia's finest?
Sure. I mean, first of all, again, because there were so many fake news and fake reports, what we need to do, is to clarify, is to rebut all these fake news and fake reports as soon as possible. That's one thing. And the other thing, action is much better than words. Okay, what our officers need to do, we will continue to discharge our duties in a professional manner. I can tell you a couple of examples. I mean, from time to time we receive letters of appreciation from members of the public, and some of them explicitly mentioned that they did not like us at the beginning over the past 2 years, but since they got in touch with us and they saw us discharging our duties in a professional manner, and they changed their attitude.
So things are happening slowly.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. In the last part of the show, I'm going to ask you, let's look at the future. I mean, I've been reading on newspapers, and I realize that ongoing recruitment is an important issue, that you are facing some issue because there may not be as many good candidates for you to choose from. What is the actual situation in short?
Oh, in short, the situation has actually improved.
Okay.
And when you talk about the recruitment situation in the first half year, when compared with the second half year last year, okay, it has actually improved by, the number of applications has actually improved by 10%.
Okay.
And also, the number of people taken on strength has increased by nearly 50% when I compare this half year with.
Okay, so there are more people.
Yeah.
But I also realize the retirement age has been extended from 55 to 60, which is a good thing for a tougher period. But let me ask you a very direct question. I'm sure the viewer will ask, will an older police force be able to cope with the current situation where you have to deal with the COVID, you've got to deal with the possible unrest and possible domestic terrorism?
Surely, our officers, I have confidence of our officers because we do care about our own health, and they will maintain, obviously, they will maintain their health situation, and I'm sure that they can cope with their duties in a professional manner, definitely.
Now, I was going to ask you, have you ever considered recruiting those with a Hong Kong resident status from overseas? Just like our medical doctors, there are shortages. Have you ever considered recruiting from overseas?
Not at this stage, Eugene.
So we are still fine.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
One last question I want to ask you. I mean, I'm sure the requirement is going to change all the time, but we used to have police officers going to the US, UK, Australia for training, and then all that is being stopped now, and they're not giving us all the equipment. Are you worried?
I'm not too worried because apart from what you mentioned, US and UK, apart from these countries, we also have training exchange with other countries, as well as our own mainland, our motherland. Because nowadays they have a lot of things that can be shared with us, and they have a lot of expertise. We will step up the frequency of our exchange.
Okay, right. Thank you, Raymond, our police commissioner, for coming tonight.
Thank you.
I think you have reassured the viewers that Hong Kong can have full confidence and trust in our police force. And thank you for watching, and good night, and see you next week.
Thank you.